This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
All righty, welcome to episode 60 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we are joined by former WNBA star, current media star for ESPN, Chiney Ogwumike. Chiney, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. And I guess I want to just start by asking you to clarify the former WNBA player part. Are you retired from the WNBA?
Dang, you coming out the gates hot. You coming out the gates hot. I always say never because I am 32 years old. Yeah. And so at some point in the future, maybe, in a random capacity, but right now I am enjoying my life broadcasting, especially in this unprecedented moment in which women's basketball has come to the mainstream. And I realize that that's where I make the most impact. I played basketball for 20 years, ever since I was 10 years old. I also am blessed to have done both, but I think right now my focus is on television. So, I don't want to, what's funny? As athletes, we get so nervous to say I've retired, It's like, this is like a soft launch.
Yeah.
A soft launch, but let's just say that I'm comfortable where I'm at and I don't foresee going back, but you never say never.
And saying that you're retired, it's not like that means that much anyway. Players have unretired plenty of times. Do you miss it? Do you miss playing?
Oh, absolutely. I just was in Seattle during this break with my older sister, and I was watching her train. I was shooting on the side, just having fun. I was like, wait, I should be doing the drills. I still got it. Do I want to dabble back in there? But it's all good.
Is there a void, and does media help to fill that void?
Ironically, I feel like I'm busier now doing TV full time than I was when I was playing, because playing, you are forced to travel and rest and be off your feet and sort of meditate before you get into the competition. But now it's I stack my days talking to you in the morning and just learning and networking with people. Leaning into television full time has been really, really fun. It's been a different challenge, but somehow, especially with March Madness and doing the I came out of the gates from last season working WNBA playoffs straight, which literally was a day before the NBA season started. Yeah. And jumped into women's college game day, and then March Madness, and then WNBA season. So for some reason, I'm what is it, Delta? Am I Diamond Medallion? What's that fancy status?
I can't help you there.
Overnight, I got to Diamond status on Delta, and so yeah, I'm a little bit busier than I was traveling before by nature of the job and the studios being on different coasts, but it's been fun.
You mentioned your older sister. How was playing with your sister in high school, college, in the WNBA? Was there a sibling rivalry when you were younger?
Never. There was never a sibling rivalry. I'll tell you once where there was a rivalry. It was on one possession at Stanford University. So for context, I've always played with my sister. When I first started playing basketball, I played 2 years up. So I played with Nneka's team in AAU. So AAU, high school, we won a state championship together. College, we went to 2 Final Fours together at Stanford. And then the first time we played against each other was, in the WNBA. But there was one possession where Coach Tara Vanderveer, the Hall of Famer, put us on opposing teams when I just got to Stanford. And allegedly, Nneka says that on one possession that I scored, that I elbowed her. I do have sharp and pointy elbows. Don't look at that. I haven't lotioned yet this morning. And Nneka turns around and says, I'm coming for you on that possession at Stanford. Do you know what I did? I immediately, in the middle of this full court game, ran to the water cooler and started drinking. I got so scared. Tara looked at me and was like, what's going on here? And I just looked like I needed help. I needed a break. I got shook. And so ever since she saw that happen, she's like, I'm not going to put these ladies on opposing team. We need to keep the peace.
How was playing against her in the WNBA?
It was funny. I guess I'm just dropping all these anecdotes because, I haven't really shared too much of myself. And now that I have the time to, the first time we ever played against each other, it was a huge moment for the league. It was a sellout at Mohegan Sun. The first matchup was on my home turf. All of our family came. We have family in New Jersey, family in Houston. Basically all of Nigeria was in the stands, and we were so excited about it. And I remember in the matchup, They were like, Chiney, I play the 5. I typically guard the 5. I should have been guarding Candace Parker, but my coach at the time was like, Chiney, you need to guard your sister in this matchup. You know her better. And like, also the league probably needs it. I was like, what are we talking about? Like, I prefer to guard Candace and not my sister. So on the opening tip, I do the jump ball, and I knew Nneka was going to get the jump ball because her, she's got hops. I have arm length, but she has like the mad hops. That first possession, she gets the jump ball, and I'm running alongside her, like, and I turned to her, I was like, Nneka, can you believe we're playing against each other? She did not hear me. He proceeds to run the first play, whom I believe it was Brian Agler, who was coaching at the time, set up for Nneka to send a message. She hit me with the jab step, turn around, fade away, mid-range. And I was like, oh my God. I think Nneka had 24 that game, and I had 18. I held my own. But for that ball, Nneka didn't see me. She didn't know me. She didn't think I was her sister. She was like, I'm about to send my little sister. we took a lot of L's early in my career, but I mean, it's been great. Anytime I was not playing the Los Angeles Sparks, she helped me learn how to guard, Tamika catching, Ziana Taurasi.
Yeah.
So it's been a good time being a sister.
Very,
as
very cool dynamic. Yeah. So how did you break in at ESPN? Because it's becoming more common today for active players to be working in media, but I feel like you were a bit more of a pioneer in doing that. It certainly wasn't as common when you started.
Yeah, thank you for that. To my knowledge, I might have been the first maybe in mainstream, sports to have a full-time position as a broadcaster and also be a active WNBA player. This all started for me a year after I did my ESPN car wash, which I don't know if people remember those, when celebrities used to come into Bristol, Connecticut, and they'd be on shows from the morning all the way till night, and you get them on every show. So I, as a draft pick who was drafted in Connecticut at Mohegan Sun, the next day I go to ESPN and do my own car wash. And I met a lot of great people there. And then, but I was like, ball is life. I want to prove myself, which I did. I was an all-star rookie of the year.
Yep.
And then I got injured. After that, I was rehabbing, and I got the opportunity based off of people sort of liking how I appeared on the shows. And, my agent advocating for me, saying like, hey, while you're here in Connecticut rehabbing, why don't you go back on ESPN? People don't realize that like my first ever official role on ESPN was subbing in for Michael and Jamel on His and Hers alongside Maria Taylor. And I can't remember who else was there. And then I also had to sub in on the summer, like when Stephen A goes on vacation.
Yeah.
I subbed in on First Take. Now, at the time, I was like, oh, okay, let me learn about these shows. I was like, oh my God, First Take, 2 hours, debating, all sports. I spent 2 weeks preparing for that 2-hour show just to be ready, and that was like sort of when I learned that the same thing that I took as an athlete in preparation for games and huge matchups is what I did and just translated it to a whole different arena. But then I loved it so much, I realized that those opportunities are few and far between because clearly Stephen A owns the chair.
Yeah.
And so I realized that women's basketball would give me some great opportunities. I did a little bit of studio work for ESPN, but then I started saying yes to everything. Pac-12 Network calling games, ESPN calling games. This was back in 2015, 2016. I'll tell you this. People don't really know. You know how everyone says you start from the trenches? My first ever real assignment for the Pac-12 Network, I thought I was getting flued out to go to the Pac-12 tournament. They're like, we want you to work the Pac-12 tournament. I was like, oh, I'm going to be interviewing the athletes or maybe even calling the games. No, they're like, we're going to use you as like a special correspondent. Cool. I didn't know until I literally got there that they had me go to, I think it was Seattle at the time, go on their like Intermetro. And they're like, we want you to interview the mascots. I was like, mascots don't talk. They don't talk. And at that moment, I always tell people that was the moment where I realized, where would keep an open mind. I don't know where this career will take me, but am I too cool for school or am I going to go and just try to see where this may go? It was a fun session. There's video of it, but I won't share it with you.
I'll have to look it up.
People no, please don't. People, got to know me, knew my passion for the game. I started calling more games, working primarily in studio. People started seeing that studio was my bag a little bit. I went back to ESPN, kept working more and more. And then in 2018, I got my first full-time position, but that was through SportsCenter International. And that's where I was a host of SportsCenter that aired throughout sub-Saharan Africa, which to me was like, spoke to my soul as a Nigerian American. And a lot of sports fans, that's how they got access to a lot of the things that happen in the US and beyond, and the top, the wide world of sports. But that really set me up for a lot of success, because in that show I was doing the same thing that Elle Duncan, Kevin Nagandi do. Hey, welcome to SportsCenter. It's your girl, Chiney Ogwumike, and this is what we have to tell you. We talked about cricket because the demographics of what they were interested in, the sports fan, were different. I always joke that I did my first baseball highlight and I said like 10K. And they're like, Chiney, that means strike. K is strike. I was like, oh, my bad. This was back in 2016-ish. And so I learned how to build a show from a very small studio that's probably the size of a quarter of a normal standard bedroom, with a producer in the room with you, and how to handle a lot of what is thrown at you in television. So that when I was doing that show, I used to go off in my basketball segments. I think it was called Heat Check with Chiney. And those segments would go internally on digital, like say our YouTubes and stuff like that. And the bosses were like, this woman, WNBA player, she's talking about NBA things. She's really great. So then they gave me a full-time position in 2018 to become an NBA analyst. That was primarily for SportsCenter.
Yeah.
And, the rise kept happening. But I was doing all of that while playing in the WNBA. People don't really know that I used to have to drive an hour 15 from Uncasville or Niantic or Groton, Connecticut, all the way to Bristol at like 5 a.m. to be there at 6, to be prepped for 7 a.m. SportsCenters, stay all the way till I think it was OTL around 2 or 3, and then the jump at the time 3, and then drive straight to my workouts, be there by like 5:36, and then go home, eat dinner, to watch the games that went till 1 a.m. And I did that for like 4 or 5 years. It was a lot, but It was thrilling, and it helps make me who I am.
Yeah, no, that's definitely it's a grueling schedule, and like it's one thing if you have to go through a schedule like that for a few months or a year, and like you kind of know the end game, but when you're doing that for years, it's definitely, that's a lot. Do you think did being drafted by the Sun help your media career? Because like, what would have happened if you were drafted by Minnesota?
It absolutely did. Being drafted by the Connecticut Sun definitely helped my professional life. It did not help my personal life. I had a man once tell me that I was geographically unattractive by living in Connecticut. But yeah, sorry to that man. He gone. Yeah, it definitely did.
And sorry to Connecticut. Sheesh.
Look, let me tell you, there's some hidden gems in Connecticut. Also, ask my former teammates; they found the spots. Found the spots. But yeah, being in Connecticut definitely helped, because it allowed me to do both in the same state, a state that you can get to places, quickly.
Yeah. So how was working with Mike Golic Jr. doing ESPN radio?
He is my best friend. Like, to this day, I get random texts from him at any time. And because like a lot of my family and friends know that I'm always on the go, I'm not a great texter. I'm someone that if you need me, you call me, and people call me in my windows of, waking up and getting ready for the day, or driving to work, or after the show. But he's someone that, like, whenever he hits me, I hit him right back. We had a freaking blast doing that show. Some of the things that we were doing on that show at that time was like ESPN Plus, where it had some buzz, right? Like bringing in all these unique social media stars and celebrities, but we also got the top athletes. We had dance party Fridays. We gave off like crazy food takes. He is family for life. He's one of my closest friends and someone I hold most dear. Like, being able to do that show with him, we always joke like, Ebony, Ivory, living. So yeah, it was probably one of the highlights of my career.
And how did radio compare with TV?
Oh, I think it allowed me to be myself. Oftentimes when you are on SportsCenter or you are an analyst on a daily show, you get your takes out in 30 seconds. Or if you're on first, maybe if you're lucky, you get like a minute and a half, 90 seconds to 2 minutes, right? But this allowed me to go long form. And also radio was very right in your home, right in your ear, like your family, your friends. And so the tone was definitely just leans on personality. And so I was able to build my own confidence in being able to be myself unapologetically. That translated to when I got roles on NBA Today and NBA Countdown. So I really do look at radio, which even like, creating, some people, I think there's so many amazing women ahead of me that have blazed the trail for radio, but in particularly at ESPN, I was occupying a position that was not necessarily there for people that I represented, right?
Yeah.
So it was it's one of those hidden gems of my career that I protect at all costs.
I know you mentioned the 2 weeks of prep work when you started on First Take. Did you know of First Take before you got to ESPN? Like, were you aware of how did you view sports debate shows when you were a player before you started getting into media?
I tried to block out a lot of media as an athlete because obviously that's a place before social media was on its rise that was most critical of athletes. And so I would watch in passing. I never would give too much credence to it. But then when I started actually preparing and first of all, I enjoyed the personalities. At the time I was like, these people are larger than life characters. And I almost envied a little bit the ability for, to be a woman in the space and to be able to be unapologetically yourself and spew out a hot take without retribution of what is going to come. And so the way I viewed the show was, it was amazing because you only see or think of debates, high school, political, and now there's a home for where it is in sports. And it's like the barbershop, it's the nail salon, So I always Stephen A is one of my closest mentors to this day, and he's done so much to empower me in his space and also internally at ESPN alongside Dave Roberts, who also does the same thing for Stephen A. I'll give you a little anecdote. I prepared for the show. I was ready. I had my numbers. I remember they asked me about the Dallas Cowboys. At the time, my best friend at Stanford, he's a guy named Ed Reynolds, who was a star cornerback, safety at Stanford. And this rumor, Stanford at the time, we had Andrew Luck, we had Zach Ertz, we were balling. It was amazing. Revenge of the Nerds, Richard Sherman. So he was a top NFL player prospect. And I was like, bro, I'm about to talk about these Cowboys. You got to help prep me. And so he started showing me some film. And he's like, Chiney, but just say this. Jerry Jones always pays players that respect the star. I was like, okay, I'm gonna put my take out there and then I'm gonna say it. And so I said it. I remember I got so many tweets like, this girl knows her stuff. And so those are the things that I do. I lean on my friends in areas and experts. And I do think that's a place where a lot of media gets in trouble at times. We assume because we have the platform, we have the views, we might be the reason why people come, that we are the expert on everything sports. But I do think the dynamics in which we've seen, especially with women's basketball, we're putting other voices forward. I try to do that in my work, lean on the voices of those who know, but also give my lived experience as a contemporary of the game. So it sort of has helped mold me for moments that we're in right now. And lastly, I'll say this. So I went on that show. It was great. They kept, having me back, but oh, we can have you as a substitute here or there. But that was maybe once or twice a month. And I had to build more reps. The next time that I really got a role on First Take was probably 2 years later. So let's say this was 2015, around 2017 when I was filling in. I never thought that I had two major injuries. The second injury was an Achilles injury. I was at home in Houston, Houston, Texas. This is before I got a full-time position at ESPN. I'd wake up every day. I'd be there with my parents because all my sisters are out there being great. I'd wake up with my parents would be there to help take, I couldn't walk, crawling, all that type of stuff for a couple months. And every day I'd wake up and I'd watch the news and then I'd turn on First Take and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with everything about it. I never knew that a year later, Stephen A would say, hey, Chiney, I want you to be a debater, a regular debater with me, talking about not just women's issues, but also NBA. So that was the power of yes, that was the power of positivity, and also just, going on the Pac-12 network and interviewing mascots and doing all these different roles and assignments, hosting SportsCenter Africa. You never know in life when you're at your lowest point where life will go if you just keep going, and that was, my parents even know, they see me on ESPN, but they also see the little girl that was laying down for 4 months, couldn't walk. And they said that she, all my friends and family never tell me I'm crazy for my dreams. And it's really lived up to my dreams. So I'm blessed.
How does doing First Take with Stephen A. Smith compare to doing it without him? You got those couple of reps early on, then doing it with Stephen A. Smith.
I think it's always better when he's there, just because you know what to expect. I know exactly, the first few years, I would say the first year or so, I was like, dang, I want to take it to him, but how do I get to him? How do I get under his skin? And then I figured it out. I know what he does. Whenever you have a good point, he starts like deflecting, throwing in some other things here. I'm like, no. We're going to stick to this subject, Stephen A.
Yeah, you got to bring it back.
You got to bring it back. You got to whip it around. So I started learning how to not only like, I think oftentimes we get so caught up in debates trying to be right that you also people just want to have fun. Yeah. Sometimes people take debates too serious. And I'm someone that is like, hey, let's bring a little bit pop culture in here. Stephen A., I know you like to be in Miami. Let's talk about Miami because I'm in Miami sometimes, so I try to infuse a little bit of lightness, positivity, happiness into that climate because I do know with a lot of the guests, it can get tense.
Yep. What were your thoughts on the tense moment a couple months ago between Stephen A. Smith and Monica McNutt?
Unfortunately, those things happen, especially I always tell people with rapid growth, what we're seeing in the women's game comes growing pains. Yeah. And comes learning opportunities. And it was learning opportunity for everyone that was watching that to be like, whoa, why did this catch fire the way it did? And I do go back to my point, when you're at the pinnacle, Stephen A. on that platform is the best at what he does. Period. And one thing I love about what Stephen A. has done is this rotating cast. He allows us, and including Shannon, to showcase a lot of different voices. And because he did that, he positioned the show to help lead the conversation and where the conversation needs to go, and also center experts that have the lived experience to say that, hey, as much as mainstream may be dominated by these subjects, we actually know what we're talking about here, and you should let us speak. And that is resonating with a lot of sports fans, our opinions too. So I'm like, we all had, it's just interesting, like working with Andrea, me, myself, being on NBA Today, we all sort of try to push the same message in different ways. And I'm really glad Monica got some love because she's someone who has been in the industry for a long time. She's great people and she stays 10 toes down on everything she believes in. And I think the world got to see it, something that we have all seen and known for a very long time. And one thing I love about Stephen A., he's like cool with feedback. Like I'll talk to him and I'll be like, hey, he might say, hey, I didn't like how you conveyed this message. I'm like, cool, but I also didn't like how you cut me off. Yeah. You know what I mean? So it's a very coachable environment, but it's also an environment where we're family. So we could disagree, but we still show up for each other.
He's approachable.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that people, to me, he's approachable to me. I know a lot of people internally at ESPN, particularly talent, that have, great, I guess you can say, mentor-mentee relationships with him. I'm one of those. Yeah. Now, I don't embrace all the way his style, but I will say this, there are very, very few people that I've seen over the time that I've been at ESPN, which is almost 10 years, which people don't really know, in different capacities, that like he works hard. He shows up and he is himself, his character, in every space that he's in. I think people would really come to enjoy the Stephen A. too that they don't see on TV. But yeah, he is someone that I think a lot of talent he builds relationships with. Now, you may not agree with his style at all times or his point of view or how he approaches some things, but nonetheless, he will impart his experience because he's been inside ESPN, he's been outside, and he's been back inside. And he'll teach you what he's learned, and you extrapolate from that. So I'm really grateful for my relationship with him.
Yeah, and I do think he does deserve credit for inviting experts and inviting people onto the show that he knows will push back on him and are willing to even check his ego at times. I do think that's brought a different dynamic to First Take over the last couple of years. But based off of that conversation, that exchange that he had with Monica, do you think that Stephen A., does he deserve more credit for platforming women's basketball today, or the criticism for not platforming it as much years ago?
Look, that's a really tough one because, again, I would say when I started off at ESPN, there were not many platforms that would just take a woman by my name, Chiney Ogwumike, but I'm trying to make it easy for everyone. Everyone calls me Chiney, and have me on talking about the NBA or the WNBA when it was not a thing. People may not remember all of those appearances, but I was there for them, But at the same time, I do think that when you are in a position where you can influence. Like I'll give you an example. When the 2020 CBA was ratified by the WNBA, my sister obviously is the president. At that time, I was vice president, and I went internally to so many producers at ESPN, particularly at sports, and I was like, y'all, this news is going to make waves. I knew it was going to make waves because my sister was celebrating the ratification on Good Morning America with Robin Roberts. So that was in the works because they looked at what was accomplished, doubling player salaries, adding maternal health benefits, just taking care of some resources. You inch till you can run, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not where what needed to be, but it was still progress. It took a while for me to eat. Like I remember there was a segment that I begged to break it down because I knew I was not going to be there when the CBA was ratified, but it was going to make news. I had to record it in Sports Center and during a commercial break, which meant I couldn't make a mistake, that broke down what the CBA accomplished. And then it was like it took like 60 seconds. I was like, and it took me a long time to pitch for that to happen. The moment that, the news came out, that segment ran for days, multiple platforms throughout the company. It's not just one platform that has had the opportunity to champion women's sports. There've been a variety of platforms. Sure. And to me, I absolutely think Stephen A. could have embraced a little bit more of what the trajectory was building towards ahead of time, but it's not just him. I think it's the entire landscape. I do think that, hopefully now what we're experiencing, people will look to what we have always known and invest in that more so now than ever before. So I think it's a little bit unfair to say, oh, Stephen A. could have been doing it, because it is true he could have, but so could have everyone else.
Yeah.
It was a battle that we were fighting across the board.
Yeah.
But now that we're here, he's leaned into it, and and I think so have many other platforms. When I remember when I used to start, I did the jump. We're doing NBA Today to start. It was hard to try to get like, hey, this highlight happened. I used to just throw in like, oh, I remember I was hosting one day on NBA Today, and I used to, I think we covered Bronny James. What was it called? The Promise. It was like a classic, a high school game that happened, a tournament that happened at USC right before he, and it was scripted. Be like, Bronny James did this, and I was like, y'all, did you know that Juju Watkins played before and she dropped like 30 and she had all the celebrities there too? So when I was hosting, I was like, hey, we're going to mention this, but I'm going to throw Juju Watkins in there. And if you want to put some film while I say it, cool. These things are still evolving. And now we have WNBA Today, and everyone from our producers, they have leaned all the way in. And I'm so proud of it because we have the space and women there to advocate for these things, from our producer, Hillary, to our host, Malika, but it's still been an evolution. So yeah, I hate when we have to fault it on one person, because he absolutely could have done this before, but a lot of people could have too.
Sure. How is working with Kendrick Perkins and Richard Jefferson?
First, let me start with Richard. Richard is freaking a troll. He's a troll. He is like that sibling that you hate, that you love. Everything, he'll literally pull up to the show right before, but then he works his magic, and because he's calling games and so close to it, he knows exactly what's going on. He's strong in his opinions, and he just freaking is annoying, but he makes us laugh. He's a sibling you love to hate. Now, the sibling that I love is Kendrick Perkins. That is my guy. That is my right hand. That's my partner. Because, as you've known, Perk and I are pretty much the ones that are in studio almost on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. So, we alternate off, we're filling in for each other on most platforms. He is one of the nicest people you ever meet, the most welcoming, most fun. He watches every game, most prepared. When you hear him say something, he's thought about it. There's always probably going to be a country Texas analogy that he's been workshopping for every specific scenario. If you watch First Take, he's going to say something that makes you go, huh? And you're like, what? Oh, he's a funny dude. That's a funny Texas dude. You know what I'm saying? But it's all his brainchild. And, he is I don't want to say this in a way that's disrespectful, but he is so much more than what people know and understand. He is a smart analyst, and he's someone that likes to get people talking, but he's someone that is passionate about the game and works hard.
I know you worked with Charlie Arnold on First Take, Her Take a few years ago. Last year when she left ESPN, she said that there were times that she felt stifled by ESPN. Have you ever felt stifled by ESPN?
Well, I worked with Charlie and I never got that tone from her because the environment that we did on that podcast, First Take, Her Take, and then also we jumped on First Take to some days to host as a panel, myself, Kimberly Martin. I never got that vibe from her. We were I think it was a pretty safe space. Like us as women in this industry trying to make our way, I never got a tone that she was stifled or felt stifled. Now seeing where, her trajectory is, particularly covering what she does, look, everyone has their own way about this industry. And if those are her opinions that she wished she could have expressed, more power to her because she found a platform that she can express them on and be supported in which. But I'll speak to my situation with her. We had a blast doing First Take, Her Take. And, I do think I have my own opinions about so many things, but my opinion does not come in front of the sports fan. To me, I always center myself on education. I am going to try to educate you on the game, and I'm going to try to get people to understand the perspective of those who are playing it. At times, that reflects a league that is predominantly Black, a league that is full of women that deal with stereotypes and preconceived notions about the league, even though we know that it is the best product of its kind. And yeah, I have to educate people to what that looks like, what it feels like, but it never comes before, I guess you can say, or it's, though my personal opinion never is more important than the collective experience of what I think, my sport is, where the sport should go, how it should grow. To me, that's not what I do, and that's not how I handle things. But everyone to each their own.
Are you more comfortable covering the WNBA or the NBA? And I ask that just because, is it strange covering teams, players, coaches that you played for and with?
Absolutely not. No. I love it because I always center myself on the authentic experience of what I know, which literally I would play. One of the craziest days I ever worked at ESPN was playing a game for the LA Sparks. We got the win, and then going to the free agency special across the street. I don't want to shame myself, but I'm not going to say it. But so we won, but I also had autographs that day. So it was really chaotic. So I was like, I have 30 minutes from end of game to be on air. At halftime, please, sorry guys, I never look at my phone, but at halftime, my agent, Allison Gaylor, was texting me the transaction so I could think about what my opinions were on X player going to X team after the game. Right after the game, I was signing autographs. She was there alongside her assistant telling me as I was like, hey kids, thanks for coming. Chiney, this player's going here. So I could start forming my opinions while the clock was ticking from the end of the game buzzer to 30 minutes where I had to be all cute and pretty on air. I sprinted across LA Live, made it to studio, and I had a blast on the free agency special. When I went, first of all, I communicated to my producers, if we lose, I'm not going, because I don't ever want my teammates to think that I'm not focused on the task at hand. Yeah. If we're not winning, I can't be distracted from the goal of winning. But when I was leaving, I remember, I think it was Jordan Canada at the time, was like, sis, make sure you say this. Tell him about this squad and this player. I've always been so supported by not only WNBA players, but also NBA players that literally will FaceTime me in the middle of my segments and say, Shay, what you talking about? I have that relationship because I'm literally so fresh from the locker room, and I would never violate that trust. And so I've always received support from everyone in the league. And honestly, I do have thoughts that at times I know conflict with, some of maybe players, particularly coaches, and all those things. But I try to really weigh those before I say them because I understand that relationship to me is the most important.
As women's basketball grows and keeps becoming more popular, we obviously mentioned that there's plenty of people and shows that could have been covering the sport more years ago, but has the national media this year done a good job in covering the sport?
Okay, so I'm going to grade it in two ways. One, ESPN, right? And then two, the overall national media landscape. I think ESPN, I'm really grateful for Dave Roberts, who is my boss at ESPN in particular, and also Jimmy Pitaro and also Burke. Those, the big three there, they understood, particularly Dave, when he took over a lot of basketball responsibilities, that there was great opportunity with these rising stars.
Yeah.
This was 4 years ago. So then we started investing in a WNBA countdown, which, you know, imagine if we tried to establish a show this year to meet it. Like I don't know if we'd be ready, but we had been building towards having the not only actual show infrastructure, but also building a roster of talent and diversifying that roster of talent to meet the moment for years, so that we would have the chemistry to be able to tell the story in an authentic way that people cared about, you know, especially this year.
Yeah.
ESPN, obviously, as a basketball player, I would have always loved them to have invested, I guess you can say, with resources, shows, talent, programming in my sport. But fortunately, their investment came, let's say, in a real meaningful way, at least from my experience with boots on the ground, 5 years ago, especially under Dave Roberts, that it shifted the paradigm so that when these moments happened, we were able to problem solve, put people in places where they could shine, and also capture the moment in a way that captivated the world. I'm really proud of that. I also am proud that we are going to continue to push forward in this. I believe in that mission. I believe that Jimmy and even Bob Iger, who is someone that has been super invested in the direction of women's sports, brought us Big Three to upfronts this year, myself, Andrea, and Elle, who's been a mentor to me. Like, there's an alignment in like supporting where this is going. And I'm grateful that there was a foundation that was invested in years ago to be able to meet the moment, even if it was not in the full way that we would have liked, but like
right.
or dreamt of, it was great. So that's ESPN. So I'm proud of it, but we still got work to do. Now, the national media landscape, I do think that there's a big learning curve. I'm really grateful for a lot of the conversation. And at times, I'm not going to lie, the way the conversation was going to start this WNBA season after the incidents that were happening, yeah, I was really concerned about it affecting the product. But now looking back, I was like, in a weird way, it kind of helped. These women are household names. These women are living up to every moment that they're put in, from whether it was, you know, Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, that matchup where Angel had 20 and 20, Caitlin had like almost messed around and had a triple-double, to even the All-Star game that my sister played in, which I was so excited, and I was a part of the broadcast. But, you know, Caitlin out here pushing assist records and Angel getting a double-double. Like, these women deliver. And so I think I was concerned about the conversation derailing that momentum, but it only lit a fire and made them even bigger stars. And it allowed people to be educated as to who the stars, Nneka Ogwumike, of the now are. They're educating themselves to these storylines. I think we're in a really good place. Now, I would prefer not to have to go on national television and speak the truth alongside my sisters, Monica and Andrea and company. But if that is a necessity to continue to educate people as to what this league, what women's basketball has always been, give our legends our flowers for building that foundation, the runway. I mean, this is a season where at All-Star, I also celebrated Candace Parker as a trailblazer in the game. Like, it has been a huge, I guess you can say, educational experience for, I think, the mainstream and how to show up for women's sports in a way that is respectful, because some people have not been respectful,
yeah,
but also how to continue to tell the stories in a way that is not just servicing one, but servicing all.
So it is can a misinformed take from a national media member or outlet about the WNBA still be better than no take at all? Like, is it a good thing to have Fox News and CNN talking about Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, even if they don't watch the WNBA?
I think that's a tricky question, because my answer, obviously I don't support those things, but I will tell you this. There is a groundswell of people that have been following the league, falling in love with the league, and understanding the league, what it represents, and just overall the sports, women's basketball, that are now, I would say, I don't want to call them like they are the ultimate fact checkers. Before, it felt like I would be alone in an arena trying to explain things in a way that people could understand, you know, and there are more and more of us that are able to do that on national platforms now. But let me tell you, the thing that gives me the most joy is that when people speak out of turn, out of pocket, the mainstream fan corrects them. So if I see something that is wrong that is said on a news outlet, I don't have to say it anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it the streets, but the streets will correct you. The streets are, and that's the difference with this rising generation. They don't fall for these clickbaity, hot topic-y type of things. And that's why I'm really honored and humbled to still be myself, because I feel like at times the industry makes you feel like you have to be that to be successful. I am seeing and receiving validation of the world being in a better place, where if people go out there and they talk out of pocket, everyone who cares about the viability of the sport and protecting the athletes and protecting this growth will correct you. And it doesn't have to be me. It can be everyone's doing it on it. So like that to me is the coolest part of all this.
Yeah. How important has Caitlin Clark been to the growth of women's basketball? Is her importance ever overstated at all?
Is it overstated? No. I think it's everything that you say about Caitlin Clark when it comes to her impact is absolutely true. She's the most impactful player that I've, seen hit the scene, not even just in basketball, but in sports in a generation, for how she moves the needle, not only with viewership, but business, and that rising tide lifts all boats. And the reason why I say for a generation is because I have the lived experience. I played against Maya Moore. I played against Candace Parker. I, played against Diana Taurasi, particularly most of those in the WNBA. And I am my big sis in life, my mentor, not even when I talk about basketball, is Lisa Leslie. I know the greatness that the game has always had. But Caitlin Clark is bringing it to new heights, exponential heights. And it's bringing and ushering the moment that we have always been waiting for. And I think a lot of times when you speak positively on other players, people take that as a shot to Caitlin. It's not. You have to celebrate those who are also advancing the game, but also recognize that Caitlin is doing things at light speed for us, with our business, with our growth, with our viewership. And a lot of people get so mad because like I say, players understand this. Yes, players understand this. And like I'm there in the locker rooms after the All-Star game where everyone is loving on each other, supporting each other. Good luck, in Paris. Hey, good luck the second half of the season. Now, when you go out there in front of the bright lights and you compete and it gets dirty and it gets competitive, people make that the personality of who these women are. That's not what it is. So, I think that's the frustrating part, knowing the real situation, but also knowing what the outer perception is. Caitlin Clark is the most impactful player we've seen in a generation, and probably when it comes to moving the business forward in the game we've ever seen. And I'm excited to be a part of this moment that she's helping elevate.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a lot of people who just assumed the WNBA was not a physical competitive sport before Caitlin Clark joined. Like there is that sort of reaction from a lot of people that are just now starting to watch it.
Yeah, that was one of the big educational points that I tried to show people, because I think people have perceptions of how women should be conducting themselves compared to men, particularly through the lens of sports.
Yeah.
These women are like badass female athletes. They don't care who's in front of them. They're there to compete. That is their job. And also, like, we have not been playing, for lack of a better way of saying this, like for the paychecks for a very long time. We're playing for pride in our game, for legacy, understanding that there's only 12 spots on this roster. You have to kill what you eat, and yeah, obviously that comes with situations that we've had to deal with, particularly through the lens of, what Caitlin had to deal with, but she chose this path. She's embraced this path and she is better for it. A lot of the times that we were worried about protecting her on the court, that first half of the year, people used to get so like, a lot of people, maybe because I'm not her teammate or on her team, like I'd say to people, I don't really care about her turnovers. I really don't. I think that her willingness to share and not care what she looks like and not care about those mistakes is going to build a better her. Her willingness to continue to show up for her fans and for herself to learn this game at the highest level is going to show up. And let me tell you something, it did. She got 19 assists, set a WNBA record. Her fans are selling out arenas and upgrading arenas. She is the moment, and she's getting better as the season goes on, as we have all shared and predicted, So yeah, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. It's been a lot for me. It's probably been a lot for you in the media reporting landscape. Can you imagine what it's been for her? That's why I'm glad she's chilling. And even while I'm seeing pictures of her taking pictures in grocery stores and on in a terminal bus train, it's a lot on her shoulders, but she's done a great job handling it. Others too, yeah. Did
you feel like you were treated differently as the #1 overall pick? Like were opponents trying to test you?
Everybody wanted to bust my ass. Everybody. I always tell people this is the first thing I learned. I told you about my sister, Nneka, prepping me for my opponents. How to play with Phoenix Mercury. Nneka, I was like, Nneka, what do I do with Diana on the perimeter? She's like, Chiney, let me tell you something. Diana, when she sees a rookie, she's going to test you. The first thing she's going to do is when you set a screen, she's going to punch you. So do what you want to do with that information. So I go down knowing I'm going to set a screen on Diana. And guess what? I hit her hard before she hit me as she tried to put, like, you have a screen, she tried to put her arm between them, like punch you the screen, like see what you made of. I hit her hard. Now the problem was on that play, a foul was called, which meant like her team had to go to the free throw line. So it was a dead ball. Like I couldn't just hit her and run. You know what I'm saying? So I go to my free throw. I was like, oh God, she's gonna like see that I leveled her. And I go and she turns on the 3-point line and makes a beeline straight for me and stands next to me. Mind you, she's not supposed to be on the free throw. Like she's the point guard. She's supposed to be back at half court. She came next to me, turned. I was like, He goes, I see you. Welcome to the league. I see you. I see you. I was like, oh my God, relief. That's what it's like to play in the WNBA. I used to get elbows in the freaking face from Sylvia Fowles as a 5 guarding her because she cut through every time. I got dropped my 3rd game by Tamika Catchings. And to this day, every time I see her, I say, thank you, Lord, for not making that shot. I touched earth, watched that ball. That was the longest 3 seconds of my life. She missed it. And if she didn't miss it, I would have been on ESPN Sports.
Right, that would have been a long-lived highlight.
That was like my first 5 games. So that's what the league is, but it makes it, you push through that, you become a beast. You know what I mean? And so that's what we know. And, I think people are seeing the beast emerge in these players.
What do you think of the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese rivalry? And do you think they're able to embrace it and even enjoy it at all?
Oh, absolutely. Like, can't you see it in their faces? I think like Caitlin's hitting shrugs. Angel Reese is still doing some of her things, flexing on opponents. I think the rivalry is so great for sports. Early on, I called it Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, not only for what these women represent demographically, coming from Iowa, coming from Louisiana, but also, the thing that I never, I guess you can say anticipated was how they delivered at this level as rookies. Because a lot of people said the difference between Larry Bird and Magic Johnson is that those guys went out and competed for championships, top awards out of the jump, right? Now, these players on their respective teams are not probably going to be competing for championships. They won't out the jump. There's still Las Vegas out there. There's still New York out there, right? There's some teams bubbling, but they are delivering in the moments that matter most. And I think that's the beauty of women's basketball that I think has a little bit edge right now when it comes to the public discourse versus men. By nature, being able to declare for the WNBA draft 3 years after you're removed from high school, which typically means you're a junior after, in college when you can declare. We've seen Jewel Lloyd, I believe, do that. But typically you stay till your senior year because you want to get your degree. And now these players stay till they're 5 years because they try to milk everything, rightfully so, and get master's degrees. You have the ability to tell your story for at least 3 years. Now you have NIL fueling brands incentives to tell your story alongside your school. Now the narrative and the story continues with this rivalry because they're close in the standings. They're both performing. Caitlin gets Rookie of the Month, and Angel gets Rookie of the Month and sets a WNBA record of double-doubles that Caitlin averages like 20 and 12 and gets Rookie of the Month. The story continues. Their play has been great. Now it may not be at the level of championship pursuit that we thought changed NBA from tape delay to now really launching the success of the new iteration of the NBA. But dang it, they're still delivering in a way that has captivated minds in pop culture. And I'm just really proud of what they've done so far.
Yeah, you mentioned the tape delay, which I think is interesting because the WNBA is 27 years old. Mm-hmm. The NBA at that point was still on tape delay when it was 27 years old. So does the WNBA ever, like where you think of what the WNBA is today and what the NBA was at 27 years old, does the WNBA ever get unfairly judged because it's constantly compared to what the NBA is today as opposed to what it was at the same age?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a long time, even until this recent boom, that there were a lot of preconceived notions as to what the WNBA is, what it represents, and how it can welcome in fans. And some of it is self-inflicted because there have been different iterations of how we marketed our league in ways that were not authentic to the players. I give a lot of credit to the rise of social media where players took control back on their brand, their imaging, and then you start seeing stars being born. One person told me that, the sign of a successful team, or at least a successful, I guess you can say, moment in athletes' sports, is when you have teams that are bigger than players that are bigger than their team followings. You're starting to see that in a lot of instances in the WNBA that will continue to move the needle forward. I think it's been judged because a lot of people that spoke and created this common sense of the WNBA, quote unquote, is a joke, right? Had never been to a game, would never say those things to a player. And those things permeated just what society thought the league was, right? Very different than what the league was when it was incepted, coming off of, I believe, the 96 Olympics that had a lot of energy and momentum.
Yeah.
Right? That has shifted. It's no longer cool to say that they're a joke. The WNBA is a joke. Now I penned it in a Players Tribune article. We went from joke to being a juggernaut. The topic, the viewership, everything is trending upward. Now, it's not at the level of where the NBA is, but I do think I was in Cannes for, they have all those like sports. I guess you can say sport is now in Cannes and like in France, and a lot of brands are out there. Someone said that we were retaining at some point, maybe it was like about a month ago, 80% of the NBA audience. To me, that was fascinating. So yeah, the trajectory is moving upward. I always tell people, like, the NBA is a freaking behemoth. It is Goliath. And we don't have to be David. We don't have to knock out Goliath. We have to build our own giant beast. If you had a company that had $1 billion valuation, you would be considered a very successful individual. When you look at our leagues, the same way that I tell people, like the moment that our commissioner, Kathy Engelberg, took the title of commissioner, in which Adam Silver supported, I knew our league was going to move in a great direction because we needed to stand on its own with the business, with our sponsors, and also attract our own set of eyes. And now I think it's cool because we're at the intersection, right? The intersection of NBA fans being WNBA fans, men's basketball fans being women's basketball fans. This is the way it should have always been, but hey, better late than never. But yeah, it's its own thing. The W is its own thing. And I think people are liking it because it's a refreshing way to enjoy basketball. Whereas in the NBA, I think some people are critical of maybe the All-Star game, critical of 82 games, to keep that passion going. You only have 40 games, and you have the stories from these women. So it's another great entry point for a lot of these new fans and the OG fans.
What do you think about the WNBA's willingness to speak on social issues, and what was your comfort level with that as a player?
I think, I learned a lot. I'll say that for the second half. The WNBA has always unapologetically been itself because we understand the communities we represent, right? We know that we've not always been quote unquote popular, but we do believe in doing the right thing and advocating for each other. I always tell people, you care about the last player on the bench when you're playing basketball as much as you care about yourself, because you're going to need that player at some point, right? It's about winning, but when you hold that trophy, it's not about holding the trophy and be like, I'm the one with the trophy. It's about looking around and being like, dang, we went through this and we share that mutual feeling of winning. That's the value that we sort of have had, especially for those in our community that needs champions.
Yeah.
And so I think as a league that is predominantly Black women, we understand the issues that are at stake that matter. And we also understand we're uniquely positioned to be those advocates for our communities, even when it's not popular. That's what we saw in 2020. And I do think the world came to see us too, for the first time, as more than just, basketball players. The product was great, but then I think the advocacy, we realized we were stronger together. I'll say this about the W and women's basketball. I always joke, like, we always have, I always tell people the WNBA is like, I'm every woman. You can find every kind of woman in the WNBA. We may not agree on all issues. We might, we have women that believe on all different sides of the spectrum, but we understand that we are stronger together and that we create space for everyone to live their life, and within that environment, we've been able to enact a lot of really great change and also advocate for things that align with our values. And so, people may not agree, but this is the demographic. This is the advocacy. It's all going back because we're like, women are like, we literally birth the next generation, and we tend to bear the brunt of a lot of the issues that happen in society. And so we know what's at stake and we stand by it, but we also stand together. Lastly, I'll say this is what I was trying to get to in the beginning. I was a part of More Than a Vote back in 2020.
Yeah.
And I think that was a huge signal that people don't realize. LeBron James can do whatever the heck LeBron James wants to do. But he realized on issues that matter, it's better to build a collective and stand together. If he knows that, then I think everyone else should know that too.
How was working as an election clerk in 2020? And how was getting the shout out from Barack Obama after that?
Let me tell you, I always love telling people like, hey, I was a poll worker. I was a poll worker for a day. For a day. Okay, no shade anywhere. They be making money. They be making money. I see them TikTok. But anywho, it was one of the most fulfilling aspects of my life. I am an international relations major. I should have been a poli-sci major, but those classes were a little bit too stuffy for me. So I started doing IR. I was mentored. My major advisor was former Secretary of State, Dr. Condoleezza Rice. So I've always been politically minded, civically minded. And I was like student body president, all that type of stuff. Super nerd. Love government, love advocacy. So when More Than a Vote happens, that, you know, they toss around the idea of like, okay, these are the things you can do. You can post in your social media channels. I'm like, oh, and you know, we have resources to like connect you to be an election clerk. And I was like, you know what? First of all, I wanted to make sure my vote counted. So like, let me go back home to Houston to make sure I vote. But I was like, if we're going to be there, you know, why not serve as election clerks and learn about that process? And then I recruited my sisters to join me. And it was so much fun because we got to see how excited people were to vote. Yeah. First time voters, long time voters. And even like the part that like resonated the most with me was when, you know, a mom voted and then turned around and her kids were in the back seat. And she was like, hey, like, this is what we're doing. This is, you know, so it was, but yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When we finished and saw President Obama's tweet, I was like, ah! We made it. That was cool. He's a huge sports fan. He's also a huge, you know, so it was to this. I think I need to frame that one.
I know you sat out the 2020 season, but did you play with Candace Parker before she went to Chicago?
I did. I played with her for 1 year.
How was your relationship with her, especially just having both been active players turned media members?
Look, Candace is, everyone knows her as one of the greatest hoopers ever, but she is, and I know she went to Tennessee and she's proud of it, but my girl is a nerd and I love that about her. She's a bookworm. I don't want to say that. She likes watching weirdly like horror films and like, but like, you know, before coming to the Sparks, Nneka and Candace were sisters. And so Candace treated me like a little sister and I loved it. I remember, I forgot what, I was so lucky. I went to, I got privy to all the cool Candace Parker life things, like her daughter's birthday party and like Boris Kojo's there. I was like, oh my God, I'm hanging out with Boris Kojo and his kids, watching his kids for him, you know, at this birthday party. So like, I've been able to see not only her grow and mature, not only as like the legend of the game and also into broadcasting, but, you know, just as a mother, as a friend. And yeah, I mean, she's just phenomenal. I don't think people understand even later in her stages, like her, the way we talk about LeBron James with IQ, Candace is up there with what she knows in the game. And I wish, you know, I wish things could have ended on more her terms, but we still celebrate her. And yeah, Candace is family.
Have you spoken to her at all since the news that the NBA on TNT is heading into its final season?
I've spoken to her, but not about that. We were too busy turning up in Phoenix, celebrating her career on the court. And she was like, how'd you make it here? You were just in Nigeria. I was like, sis, for you, I'm gonna make it back. I'm gonna make it back for you. So yeah, we didn't talk about that. But you know, she is phenomenal. I love listening to her on games. And yeah, I mean, it's just great to be able to like, we're teammates. We were opponents, we're teammates, but like, you know, I'm just happy for her.
Does NBC and Amazon getting NBA rights, does that feel like it opens up more opportunities for your career potentially? Like, can you ever foresee leaving ESPN?
I love ESPN. I really do. And I have so many great relationships within the company internally. I've mentioned a few of them, from Dave Roberts, Jimmy Pitaro to Bob Iger, my daily crew on NBA Today. Hillary Guy has been huge. Pete McConville has been huge for me. So, and Burke as well, you know, he came over seeing our group, like, you know, recently, the last few years too. So like, I have a lot of great relationships. They're family. But, you know, my agent would be in my ear saying, Jay, hey, you know, like, I think to me, I always just want to keep growing. I am such a what's the bookworm version of a television analyst? Like, I go in and I prepare, but I also like to know the camera operators, the producers. I know how to write scripts. I've worked, Richard Jefferson gave me a pep talk 2 years ago. He said, Chiney, you're really good at analyst work and you've done games, but you're in studio a lot. I think that's great, but like, you should really try hosting too. And I was like, I don't know. It's like a lot of responsibility, but I realized, one thing that Simone Augustus told me in reference to Diana Taurasi lives in my head. She said the reason why Diana Taurasi is the all-time leading scorer in the WNBA and a great player and a champion is because it takes vulnerability to be able to miss the shots in order to learn how to make the shots, to be great, to be an icon of the game. And so I was like, I need to apply that to my broadcasting career. So let me step into like hosting a little bit, learn that skill set as I've learned a lot of other skill sets. Now, mind you, I did SportsCenter Africa, but like, come on, y'all see that. You know what I mean? So I think hosting has been the next challenge for me. And I've been able to, under, our umbrella of NBA, host a lot of shows, just working on my skill set as a broadcaster, to me, breaking the game down, just being a better all-around player. I think that lends to my benefit no matter where the future holds. So yeah, I feel uniquely positioned to be ready for any opportunity that might land my way. And yes, there's a different landscape that's really exciting. I think it's awesome for the sport because it energizes new places, which means new talent, new faces. I love ESPN. I love my ESPN family, and I want it to be home. But I do know that I want to also continue to always grow in my career and even expand outside of basketball. There's something about like my life. I'm like, okay, basketball player, basketball analyst, but I'm still that nerd from Cypress, Texas, that fell in love with international relations, that cares about the news, that has opinions on life, that I want to share those too. And so just taking, life where my mom always says, tiny drops of water make a mighty ocean. I just keep putting these little drops of water in a bucket, and maybe another wave might come. Because I never thought broadcasting was going to be my life, and look at me, Yeah. So I never know what's coming next.
Chiney, you were great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. And thank you for asking the hard question. This was like, it's because you're just so chill. You're like, oh, here's the question. I'm like, wow. Hey, but you're tougher than the people I have to go against on air.
I can't imagine that's true, but
you're right.
I appreciate it.
There's one or two exceptions. Thank you, Brandon. You have a lovely day. Appreciate you.
You too.
Bye, guys.
That is Chiney Ogwumike. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.